The air in Winnipeg's Aerospace Research Center was a blade, slicing through my lungs with every breath. The room, a sterile tomb of steel and concrete, pulsed with the venom of 50 accusing stares. "She's the failure who killed the Aurora drone," their whispers spat, each word a jagged shard ripping into my soul. At the heart of this arena stood my father, General Robert McLean, his dress blues a mockery of honor. His voice erupted, a vicious snarl that shattered the silence. Who dared let this disgrace walk through my doors? His finger stabbed at me, a public executioner's blade, carving my worth to nothing. His laughter, cruel, guttural, a beast's roar, tore through the room, shredding my dignity before every engineer, every officer, every soul I'd fought for. My heart screamed, a raw, bleeding wound, the pain so deep it felt like my bones would splinter. I was drowning in betrayal, choking on rage. They thought they'd buried me. They were dead wrong. And this agony is where my fight begins. I'm Sophie Laurent. I'm 35 years old. A major in the Canadian Armed Forces, an aerospace engineer who built the Aurora drone from a spark of an idea into a machine that could have changed the skies. But to my father, General Robert McLean, I'm nothing but a shadow, a footnote to his legacy, eclipsed by my younger brother, James. In the sterile glow of Winnipeg's Aerospace Research Center, 300 kilometers north of the U.S. border, I stood frozen, the echo of my father's venomous words, "Who dared let this disgrace walk through my doors?" still burning in my ears. The pain wasn't just in his voice, it was in the frostbitten air of Manitoba, in the sleek, modern labs where my designs were born, and in the weight of a lifetime spent proving myself to a man who'd never see me. This wasn't the first time he'd carved me out of my own story. 17 years ago, at the Royal Military College in Kingston, Ontario, I stood on a stage, my hands trembling as I clutched a gold-plated award for an inertial guidance system I'd crafted in our garage. It was a breakthrough, 1.2 kilograms lighter than anything the military had seen, precise to within 0.01 degrees. I'd spent nights hunched over schematics, my fingers stained with solder, my eyes blurred from equations. The auditorium smelled of polished oak and history, the crowd buzzing with pride. I was 18, electric with the thrill of creation. Then my father, in his crisp dress blues, took the podium. "This victory," he boomed, his voice filling the hall, "is thanks to my son, James, whose leadership brought this project to life." James, who'd done nothing but complain about the late nights I'd kept him up. The applause roared for him, not me. I stood there, award in hand, invisible. My heart didn't break, it shattered, each piece a jagged reminder that my father's love was reserved for his golden boy. Back in Winnipeg, the memory stung like the -30 degrees Celsius wind off the Red River. The Aerospace Research Center was a fortress of glass and steel, its labs humming with the promise of innovation. But for me, it was a battlefield. My father, General Robert McLean, ruled it like a king, his authority as unyielding as the Manitoba prairie. James, now 32, strutted through the halls, his new role as project coordinator, handed to him by our father, draped over him like an ill-fitting suit. He'd flash his smug grin, oblivious to the fact that every idea he pitched was stolen from my old notebooks. "Sophie, you're too intense," he'd say, chuckling, as if my passion was a flaw. "Just let me handle the big stuff." I wanted to scream, to tell him he was a fraud, but the weight of our father's shadow silenced me. Yet, in that moment, as I stood in the aftermath of my father's public execution, something shifted. The pain was a furnace, forging my rage into resolve. I wasn't just fighting for my reputation, I was fighting for the truth. The Aurora drone wasn't a failure. It was sabotaged. And I'd prove it, even if it meant tearing down the empire my father had built. "You're wrong about me," I whispered to myself, my breath fogging in the cold. The fight was just beginning. The Aerospace Research Center in Winnipeg was a labyrinth of glass and steel, but to me, it felt like a prison carved from ice. The sting of my father's words, "Who dared let this disgrace walk through my doors?" clung to me like the bitter -35 degrees Celsius wind howling outside, rattling the windows of the facility 300 kilometers north of the U.S. border. Every step I took down the polished corridors echoed with the sharp click of my boots, a solitary sound drowned by the venomous whispers of my colleagues. "That's Sophie Laurent," they muttered, their voices low but cutting, like knives sharpened on Manitoba granite. "The general's daughter who botched the Aurora drone. What's she still doing here?" Their words weren't just gossip, they were a coordinated assault, orchestrated by the man who should have defended me, General Robert McLean. My father. In the lab, where the air hummed with the faint buzz of machinery, I felt the weight of every glance. Engineers I'd once led now turned away, their eyes sliding past me as if I were a ghost. Ethan Tremblay, my father's hand-picked protege, leaned against a workstation, his smirk as sharp as a skate blade. "Still clinging to your theories, Sophie," he taunted, loud enough for the room to hear. "Maybe stick to fixing coffee machines. This is real engineering." His laugh was a jagged echo of my father's, and the room joined in, a chorus of disdain that made my skin burn. I wanted to fire back, to tell him the Aurora's failure wasn't mine, but the words caught in my throat, choked by the weight of their judgment. My hands clenched, nails digging into my palms, drawing half-moons of pain. I forced myself to stand taller, my jaw tight, but inside, I was fracturing. Later that day, in a stark office overlooking the frozen Red River, my father summoned me. The room was cold, the thermostat set to a punishing 15 degrees Celsius, as if to mirror his mood. General Robert McLean sat behind his desk, his uniform pristine, his steely gray eyes dissecting me like a flawed blueprint. "Sophie," he began, his voice low and deliberate, each word a calculated strike, "you're embarrassing yourself. And worse, you're embarrassing me. The Aurora project is done. Accept it and stop stirring up trouble." His tone wasn't anger, it was worse. It was dismissal, as if I were a child who'd spilled milk, not a major with 15 years of service. "You need to know your place," he added, leaning forward, his hands folded like a judge pronouncing a sentence. "Support your brother. James is the future of this family." I stared at him, my heart pounding, a storm of rage and betrayal swirling inside me. "My place?" I shot back, my voice trembling but sharp. "My place was designing the Aurora, Dad. And you know it wasn't my failure." He didn't flinch, just waved me off. "Enough. Get out." Back in the corridor, the whispers grew louder, a relentless tide eroding my resolve. I passed James, my 32-year-old brother, strutting toward the executive wing in a tailored suit that screamed unearned confidence. He caught my eye and grinned, that same smug grin from our RMC days when he'd taken credit for my work. "Hey, Soph," he called, his voice dripping with false camaraderie, "don't take it personally. Dad's just stressed. Maybe ease up on the conspiracy theories, eh? I've got big plans for Aurora's reboot." I froze, my fists tightening. His big plans were my designs, pilfered from late-night brainstorming sessions I'd shared with him years ago, thinking he cared. "You wouldn't know a rotor from a rivet, James," I snapped, my voice low but venomous. He laughed, shrugging, and sauntered off, leaving me alone in the hallway's cold fluorescence. That evening, I stood outside the center, the Manitoba sky a bruise of purple and gray, the wind cutting through my coat. The Red River stretched before me, its icy surface a mirror to my isolation. I was 35, a decorated engineer, yet I felt like nothing, a speck of dust in my father's empire. Every colleague's sneer, every word from my father, every stolen victory by James piled onto a wound that had festered since I was 18. I wanted to scream into the frozen air, to let the prairie wind carry my rage, but it wouldn't change a thing. The Aurora drone, my life's work, had crashed, and they'd pinned it on me. But I knew the truth. Deep in my bones, I knew the failure wasn't mine. It was engineered, by my father, by his lies, by a system that valued loyalty over merit. As I stood there, the cold seeping into my marrow, a spark of defiance flickered. They could isolate me, mock me, erase me. But they couldn't silence the truth. I wasn't done. Not yet. The wind howled outside my small Winnipeg apartment, a relentless -40 degrees Celsius gale that rattled the windows and mirrored the storm tearing through my chest. It was late, the city cloaked in the heavy darkness of a Manitoba winter, the Red River frozen solid 500 meters below my fifth-floor balcony. Inside, the air was barely warmer, the thermostat stuck at a miserly 14 degrees Celsius, as if the cold had seeped into my life to stay. My father's words from the Aerospace Research Center still echoed, "Who dared let this disgrace walk through my doors?" Each syllable a fresh wound, bleeding into the whispers of my colleagues and James's smug grin. I sat on the edge of my couch, the dim light of a single lamp casting long shadows across the room, my hands clutching a chipped mug of tea that had gone cold hours ago. The weight of betrayal pressed down, a crushing force that made every breath feel like a battle. Then my phone rang, the shrill sound slicing through the silence. It was my mother, Claire McLean, her name on the screen a warning I couldn't ignore. I answered, bracing myself. "Sophie, what are you doing to us?" she sobbed, her voice thick with tears, each word a calculated dart aimed at my heart. "Your father's under so much pressure, his career, our family's honor, it's all at stake. Why are you so selfish? Think of James, his future." Her words weren't just a plea, they were an accusation, twisting my fight for truth into a betrayal of blood. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white, my voice barely a whisper. "Selfish? Mom, I'm fighting for what's right. The Aurora wasn't my failure." She didn't hear me. "You're tearing us apart," she cried, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "For God's sake, Sophie, stop before you destroy everything." The line went dead, leaving a silence so heavy it felt like the room was collapsing around me. I stumbled to the balcony, the icy air stinging my face like a slap. The city sprawled below, its lights blurred through the tears I couldn't hold back. My mind dragged me back to Kingston, to a memory I'd buried deep. I was 17, standing in my RMC cadet uniform, the navy wool crisp against my skin, waiting for my parents at my graduation ceremony. I'd earned top honors in engineering, my project, a lightweight drone thruster, precise to 0.005 degrees, praised by my professors as groundbreaking. The parade square was alive with families, the air warm with June's promise, but my parents weren't there. They'd driven 200 kilometers to Toronto for James's 15th birthday party, a lavish affair at a lakeside restaurant. "He needs us more," my mother had said over the phone, her voice casual, as if my milestone was a minor inconvenience. I stood alone that day, my cap in hand, watching other cadets embrace their families, the pride in their eyes a mirror to the emptiness in mine. The memory clawed at me now, a wound ripped open, raw and bleeding. Back in the apartment, I sank to the floor, my back against the balcony door, the cold glass biting through my sweater. My eyes fell on an old photo on the coffee table, me, James, Mom, and Dad at a Canada Day picnic in Winnipeg's Assiniboine Park, years ago when I still believed in family. My smile in the photo was wide, naive, trusting. Now, it mocked me. My father had erased me at RMC, handed my victories to James. My mother had chosen him over me, again and again. And now, they demanded my silence, my sacrifice, to protect their fragile empire. The photo trembled in my hands, my tears falling onto the glass frame. With a guttural cry, I hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall, the sound a jagged echo of my breaking heart. I was alone, utterly, devastatingly alone. The pain was a black hole, swallowing every hope, every dream, every piece of Sophie Laurent. Yet, in that suffocating darkness, a flicker of rage sparked. They wanted me to disappear, to be the obedient daughter, the silent failure. But I wasn't that girl anymore. The Aurora drone wasn't just a project, it was my truth, my proof, my defiance. As the wind screamed outside, I stood, my legs shaking but my resolve hardening. They could break my heart, but they couldn't break me. I wiped my tears, my breath steadying. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The shards of the broken photo frame lay scattered across my Winnipeg apartment floor, glinting in the dim lamplight like fragments of a life I no longer recognized. The Red River, 500 meters below, was a frozen ribbon under the -40°C Manitoba night, its icy silence a mirror to the void left by my mother's sobbing accusations and my father's brutal dismissal. Claire McLean's words, "You're tearing us apart," and General Robert McLean's command to know my place had carved a wound so deep I thought it would swallow me whole. But as I stood there, the cold seeping through the balcony door's glass, something inside me snapped, not in defeat, but in defiance. The pain, raw and unbearable, was no longer a weight to crush me. It was fuel, a blazing furnace forging a new Sophie Laurent. I wasn't the failure they'd branded me. The Aurora drone's crash wasn't my mistake, it was a betrayal, and I'd prove it. My breath fogged the air as I moved to my desk, the apartment's thermostat still stuck at a punishing 14°C. My laptop hummed to life, its blue glow cutting through the darkness like a beacon. I wasn't just an engineer, I was a soldier trained in technical intelligence, and those skills, buried under years of doubt, were waking up. I remembered my uncle, Daniel Gagnon, a retired aerospace engineer whose quiet wisdom had anchored me through my father's storms. Years ago, in his cluttered garage 100 kilometers east of Winnipeg in Steinbach, he'd leaned over a disassembled turbine, his calloused hands steady. "Machines don't lie, Sophie," he'd said, his voice a low rumble, like the Red River in spring. "People do. Listen to the metal. It'll tell you the truth." His words echoed now, a lifeline pulling me from the abyss. I wasn't fighting for my father's approval anymore. I was fighting for the truth Daniel had taught me to hear. I logged into the Aerospace Research Center's secure network, my fingers flying across the keyboard with a precision honed at RMC Kingston. The system's firewalls were formidable, but I knew their weaknesses, gaps I'd noticed years ago when I designed the Aurora's control protocols. I didn't need to break in like a hacker, I slipped through like a ghost, mimicking the access of a low-level technician. My heart pounded, adrenaline spiking as I navigated the digital labyrinth, diving into archived logs and forgotten data caches. The center's servers, housed in a chilled vault 10 meters below ground, held secrets no one thought to guard. At 2 a.m., I found it, a buried file labeled Aurora Calibration Override, Q2. My breath caught as I opened it. There, stark and undeniable, was General Robert McLean's digital signature, timestamped at 3:17, 24 hours before the Aurora's catastrophic failure. He'd altered my 6-stage safety protocol, stripping it to a reckless 2-stage system that guaranteed disaster. My own father had sabotaged my work. I leaned back, my pulse hammering, the screen's glow burning my eyes. This wasn't negligence, it was deliberate, a calculated act to bury my success and protect his legacy. Rage surged, white-hot, but I held it tight, channeling it into focus. I needed more. A single file wouldn't be enough against a general's word. As dawn's first light crept through the frost-covered windows, painting the room in pale gray, a soft ping broke the silence. An encrypted email from Ava Chen, a young data analyst from the center, flickered on my screen. I'd barely spoken to her, but her message was brief and urgent. "Major Laurent, I kept a backup of the Aurora's original diagnostic logs. It's not right what they did. Meet me at 0700, Fort Garry Hotel Cafe." My heart leapt. Ava, quiet and unassuming, had seen something too. I met Ava in the cafe, its warmth a stark contrast to the -30°C chill outside. She slid a USB drive across the table, her hands trembling, her eyes darting toward the door. "This is the unedited data from the day of the crash," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the clink of coffee cups. "They wiped it from the system, but I couldn't let it go. You deserve to know." I took the drive, its plastic casing warm from her grip. "Why now, Ava?" I asked, my voice steady but sharp. She looked down, her fingers twisting a napkin. "I have a daughter. I want her to grow up knowing the truth matters." I nodded, a spark of gratitude cutting through my anger. "Thank you," I said, my tone softening. "You're braver than you know." She gave a shaky smile and left, her footsteps fading into the morning bustle. Back in my apartment, I plugged the drive in, my hands steady now. The data confirmed it, my design was flawless until my father's override. The truth was in my hands, a weapon forged from code and courage. I wasn't the broken girl anymore. I was a warrior, and the battle for justice was mine to wage. The Aerospace Research Center in Winnipeg buzzed with a tension so thick it could choke you, the air heavy with the hum of machinery and the sharp bite of a minus 25 degrees Celsius Manitoba morning seeping through the steel walls. I, Sophie Laurent, stood in the simulation room, a cavernous space 20 meters long, its massive holoscreen pulsing with the digital ghost of the Aurora drone. My father, General Robert McLean, had turned this into his stage, inviting a hand-picked group of defense journalists from across Canada, CBC, Globe and Mail, CTV, to witness what he thought would be my final humiliation. Ethan Tremblay, his smug protege, stood beside him, radiating confidence like a peacock in a prairie storm. My brother, James McLean, lounged in a corner, his tailored suit a mockery of his unearned title. They thought they'd scripted my defeat. But I held Ava Chen's USB drive in my pocket, its weight a promise of truth, and my uncle Daniel Gagnon's words echoed in my mind, "Machines don't lie, Sophie." The room was a pressure cooker, every eye on me as I stepped toward a wall-sized whiteboard, its surface gleaming under the fluorescent lights 5 meters above. Ethan's voice cut through the silence, dripping with condescension. "What's this, Sophie?" "Another one of your cute drawings," he sneered, his words met with chuckles from his loyal engineers. I didn't flinch. My hand gripped a black marker, its cap snapping off with a sharp click that echoed like a gunshot. With steady, deliberate strokes, I began to recreate the Aurora's original design, every coolant loop, every thruster valve, every line of my 6-stage safety protocol, precise to 0.01 degrees. The board transformed into a testament, a map of truth drawn from memory, each stroke a defiance of the lies that had buried me. The room grew quiet, the journalists' pens pausing, their cameras turning toward me. General Robert McLean's face was a mask of stone, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. He nodded to Ethan. "Run the current configuration," he ordered, his voice a low growl, confident in his sabotage design. The holoscreen roared to life, the Aurora's virtual engine screaming as telemetry numbers climbed. At 85 seconds, amber warnings flashed, then red. The screen shrieked, "Critical failure. Rotor imbalance. Catastrophic event imminent." Ethan slammed the emergency stop, his face a rehearsed portrait of weary competence. "As you can see," he told the journalists, his tone smooth, "the original design has inherent flaws we're working to fix." My father nodded, his approval a silent seal on the lie. The journalists scribbled, ready to cement my failure in print. Then Dr. Margaret Sinclair stepped forward, her petite frame commanding the room like a general in a tailored suit. Her salt and pepper hair gleamed under the lights, her voice cutting through the smug air like a laser. "Thank you, Mr. Tremblay," she said, her tone as cold as the Red River in January. "Now, run Major Lawrence original configuration." My rank. She'd used my rank. A jolt shot through me, my heart pounding as I handed Ava's USB drive to the lead engineer. Ethan smirked, leaning close. "Let's see your little dance, Major," he whispered, venom in every syllable. I met his gaze, unflinching, my voice steady. "It's not a dance, Ethan. It's the truth." The simulation restarted. The system bucked, alarms blaring as the Aurora fought the unfamiliar parameters. Red lights flashed across every console, the journalists murmuring, Ethan's smirk widening. But I knew this chaos, it was the machine's protest, not its failure. "Pause simulation," I commanded, my voice ringing clear. I stepped to the master console, my fingers dancing over the controls, recalibrating the fuel mixture to 0.02% variance, adjusting the coolant flow to 1.5 liters per second, and tuning the harmonic feedback loop to 0.001 Hz. I didn't look at the data streams. I didn't need to. I closed my eyes, feeling the engine's pulse, hearing its truth, just as Daniel taught me. "Continue simulation," I said. The room held its breath. The alarms fell silent, one by one. Red lights flickered to amber, then green. The tortured groan of the virtual engine smoothed into a powerful, perfect hum, resonating through the room like a heartbeat. The clock ticked past 85 seconds, then 120, 180, 240, completing a full 300-second cycle without a single error, surpassing efficiency projections by 8%. The silence that followed was deafening, louder than any explosion. The journalists lowered their cameras, their faces a mix of shock and awe. Ethan's smirk vanished, his face pale as Manitoba snow. General Robert McLean stood frozen, his empire of lies crumbling in the face of my truth. I was no longer the disgrace. I was Sophie Laurent, the engineer who'd just rewritten the story. The Manitoba sun was sinking, casting a blood-red glow over the windswept outskirts of Winnipeg, where my workshop, a 200-square-meter corrugated metal box, stood like a fortress of grease and grit. The air was sharp, a biting -30 degrees Celsius that clawed through the walls, but I, Sophie Laurent, was too consumed to feel it. The triumph in the Aerospace Research Center's simulation room still burned in my veins, the memory of the Aurora drone's perfect hum silencing Ethan Tremblay's smirk and exposing my father's lies before the journalists. Yet, as I wrestled with a stubborn hydraulic pump, my hands black with oil, the weight of my victory felt hollow. General Robert McLean's empire was cracking, but the war wasn't over. Not yet. The truth had won a battle, but the scars of his betrayal, my mother Claire's accusations, and my brother James's theft still festered, raw and unrelenting. A low rumble broke the evening's quiet, and I looked up to see a sleek black sedan pull up, kicking up a cloud of dust that swirled like a phantom in the fading light. The door opened, and out stepped my father, General Robert McLean, stripped of his dress blues. In a plain wool coat, he looked diminished, his broad shoulders stooped, his face etched with lines that aged him a decade in days. The towering monolith who'd called me a disgrace was gone, replaced by a man who seemed almost human, almost. He stepped toward the workshop, his boots crunching on the gravel, each sound a countdown to a reckoning I'd waited 35 years for. I wiped my hands on a rag, the oil smearing like war paint, and stood in the doorway, my heart a drumbeat of rage and resolve. Sophie, he began, his voice raspy, lacking the thunder that had once shattered me. I never meant for it to go this far. I changed the Aurora's design to protect you. It was too risky, too ambitious. His words were a lie, slick and rehearsed, as if he could rewrite history with a few soft syllables. My blood boiled, the pain of a lifetime, his theft of my RMC award, his dismissal in the simulation room, Claire's sobbing demands, igniting into a fire I could no longer contain. Protect me? I spat, my voice low but razor sharp, cutting through the frigid air. You sabotaged my work, Dad. You signed the override. You let me take the fall to save your precious legacy. My words hung between us, heavy as the 2-ton engine behind me. His eyes flickered, a crack in his facade, but he pressed on. You don't understand the pressure I was under, he said, stepping closer, his hands raised like a man pleading for mercy he didn't deserve. I did it for the family, for James. James? I laughed, a bitter, jagged sound that echoed off the workshop's metal walls. You gave him everything, my designs, my victories, my life. You built him an empire on my ruins. My voice trembled, not with weakness but with a fury so pure it felt like it could melt steel. I reached for the RMC crest pinned to my jacket, a heavy brass emblem I'd worn since graduation, a symbol of the honor he'd twisted into a chain. My fingers closed around it, the metal cold against my skin. You don't get to hide behind family anymore, I said, my voice steady now, each word a hammer strike. I ripped the crest off, the fabric tearing with a sound like a breaking heart, and thrust it into his open hand. This belongs to you. Your legacy of lies. I'm done carrying it. He stared at the crest, his face paling, his mouth opening as if to argue, but no words came. For the first time, General Robert McLean was speechless, his authority stripped bare in the Manitoba dusk. I turned, my boots heavy on the concrete, and grabbed the workshop's roll-up door. I'm building my own legacy, I said, my voice clear, unyielding, a vow carved in the air. One forged in truth, not your control. The door slammed down with a deafening clang, the sound reverberating across the prairie like a gunshot. I left him standing alone in the dust, the wind howling around him, a fallen king in a kingdom of his own making. Inside, the workshop's silence wrapped around me, but it wasn't empty. It was alive with the hum of machines, the scent of oil, and the echo of my Uncle Daniel Gagnon's words, "Listen to the metal." I was free, not just from my father, but from the weight of his expectations, Claire's guilt, and James's theft. The truth was my weapon now, and I was ready to wield it. The Manitoba sky blazed with the fiery hues of a late summer sunset, painting the horizon in shades of burnt orange and deep purple over my expanded workshop on the outskirts of Winnipeg. The 400 square meter space, once a solitary refuge of grease and steel, now hummed with life, its walls echoing with the clang of tools and the laughter of women learning to wield them. I, Sophie Laurent, stood at the threshold of my new empire, no longer defined by the wreckage of General Robert McLean's betrayal or the stinging accusations of my mother, Claire McLean, or the stolen victories of my brother, James McLean. The Aerospace Research Center, 10 kilometers away, was a fading shadow, its sterile halls replaced by the warm, gritty reality of my Uncle Daniel project, a tuition-free technical school for female veterans, named for my uncle, Daniel Gagnon, whose wisdom had saved me from despair. Inside, the air smelled of fresh coffee and motor oil, a far cry from the -40°C chill of my old apartment where I'd shattered a family photo in a moment of raw anguish. Now, the workshop was alive with purpose. Women in coveralls, their hands stained with the same grit that marked mine, worked on engines and circuits, their voices rising in confident debate. I moved among them, my boots steady on the concrete floor, offering guidance not from textbooks but from the lessons Daniel taught me. "Listen to the machine," I told a young veteran struggling with a turbine blade, my voice soft but firm. "It's not about forcing it, it's about understanding what it needs." She nodded, her eyes brightening, and adjusted her wrench with newfound precision. In her focus, I saw my own reflection, not the broken girl my father had tried to erase, but the engineer who'd faced him down and won. I stepped outside, the evening air a crisp 15°C, and sat on an old metal stool, the Red River glinting 2 kilometers away under the fading light. In my hands, I held a letter from Dr. Margaret Sinclair, its Department of National Defense seal crisp against the paper. She'd informed me that my rank of major was restored, with full back pay and an offer to lead a new R&D division. "We need your courage, Major Laurent," she wrote, her words a quiet validation. I folded the letter and placed it in a wooden box beside Daniel's old wrench, its handle worn smooth from years of use. The recognition mattered, but it wasn't my legacy. My legacy was here, in the laughter of my students, in the steady hum of machines brought back to life, in the truth I'd fought for against Ethan Tremblay's sneers and my father's lies. I thought of Daniel, his voice echoing from a Steinbach garage years ago, "Machines don't lie, Sophie." I thought of Margaret Atwood's words, a line I'd read in a dog-eared book, "A word after a word after a word is power." My words, my truth, had built this place. "You were right, Daniel," I whispered to the wind, a smile breaking across my face. The sunset burned brighter, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold isolation I'd once known. This wasn't just a workshop, it was a sanctuary, a testament to resilience, a place where women like me could forge their own truths. The silence of my past, once a suffocating void, was now a symphony of purpose, rising from the prairie like a song only I could hear. The Manitoba sky softened into a deep indigo, the last embers of the sunset fading over the prairie horizon, casting a gentle glow across my workshop's open doors, 10 kilometers from Winnipeg's heart. I, Sophie Laurent, sat on my old metal stool, the air a cool 12°C, the Red River's distant murmur a quiet companion. The pain of General Robert McLean's betrayal, Claire McLean's accusations, and James McLean's theft no longer defined me. The triumph over Ethan Tremblay's sneers and the validation from Dr. Margaret Sinclair were milestones, but my true victory was here, in the Uncle Daniel project, where the clang of tools and the laughter of female veterans filled a space once heavy with silence. My uncle, Daniel Gagnon, taught me to listen to machines, but he also taught me to listen to my truth, a truth that carried me through fire. I've walked a path carved by betrayal, but I've learned that your truth is your greatest strength. It's not found in titles, ranks, or the approval of others. It's in the courage to stand up, to speak when the world demands your silence, to build something new from the ashes of what was taken. Every one of you watching has a story, a truth that deserves to be heard. Don't let anyone, family, colleagues, or doubters, write it for you. If my journey, from the cold halls of the Aerospace Research Center to this workshop's warm light, resonates with you, share your story in the comments below. Tell us about a time you stood for your truth. Your voice matters. If this story moved you, give it a like, and join our True North Courage community by subscribing. Together, let's honor the courage that rises from our deepest struggles, like a prairie wind carrying us forward.